Okay, tell us a little bit about what your favorite Boniface Wimmer letter is, and why.
Well, there are many wonderful letters that Wimmer wrote. The one that stands out in my mind is a letter that he wrote to Father Julian Kilger, who was a young priest who had been assigned to Saint Vincent. He had been in Newark, and he was called back to Saint Vincent, and he didn't want to come back from Newark. So he wrote a letter to the Archabbot saying that he wanted to stay in Newark, and the Archabbot said no. And he wrote back again and said he wanted to stay in Newark. And he must have been, I haven't found the letter that he wrote to the Archabbot, but he must have been a little demanding. And the Archabbot, who could himself be fairly hard-headed sometimes, and who did not suffer fools gladly, wrote back he could have written back a letter that was fairly strong and harsh to this young priest who was saying, I don't want to do what you told me to do. But he must have known something about this young priest that told him that the way to handle him was with gentleness. And you don't always think of Boniface Wimmer as being a gentle person.
Okay, now you translated some of these letters yourself,
I did,
correct?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the actual physical letters? Are they, when I think of letters, what we think of, but what do these look like? What do they feel like?
Most of them are on paper that's colored with time. It's turned brown. The handwriting is a very, very precise, attractive handwriting in black ink, which now has turned rather grayish. Some of the letters were written on paper that is now crumbling, but all of the letters have been photographed, and I'm just speaking to one of the people who's working in the archives, and they're digitalizing them, so that's a very good thing.
How they started translating them, who did them, maybe not names, but just the groups.
The translations of the letters have gone back, have started long ago. Wimmer wrote between 1832, which is the earliest letter that we have, and 1887, when he died. He wrote thousands of letters. We have in the archives about between 15 and 1600 of these letters. Many copies, and also many originals. These letters were collected beginning in about 1890 by monks from Saint Vincent who were in Rome, where many of the letters were sent, or in Bavaria, where they were sent as well. And many of the letters that we have that are originals were given to these St. Vincent monks who were doing research in Europe between about 1890 and 1938, before the Second World War.
What do these letters tell us about Boniface Wimmer? You touched on it a little bit with the letter to Julian.
Yeah, they tell us a lot of things. I want to emphasize the fact that they show a man committed to a mission, a man who had an idea when he was young, which was to bring the Benedictine tradition to the United States, to establish a Benedictine community here, and to introduce America to the wisdom of Saint Benedict.
What significance do the letters have? Not just for historians, but just for normal people.
One of the things that struck me when I was doing the selection, which has come out now in the book Letters of an American Abbot, which has 200 of the 1,600 letters in it. These are the 1,600 letters that survived. There were thousands that we just don't know where they are. What struck me about these letters was how they showed a young man, a young person, a young religious, focusing on a vision that he had, a plan that he said came from God, and being faithful to the fulfillment of that vocation, that call to fulfill that plan, for 41 years. He came here in 1846, and what he started out to do in 1846, he was still doing in 1887.
Imagine if he could email.
Oh, if email existed in those days, he would have been in a lot of trouble, because he would have punched the button before he had really read through. At least when he was writing these letters, he had an opportunity to say, okay, I'm not going to send this one. And all of us who deal with email know that that's something that we often don't do. Look at what we've written before we send it. One of the things that Kim Metzger did for me a couple of months ago was to put me in touch with a couple of newspaper reporters who were preparing some articles on the Wimmer bicentennial. And one of the newspaper reporters asked me, as part of her questions, one that was very interesting and made me sit back and think. And that was, if I could write a letter to Boniface Wimmer today, what would I say to him? If I could write a letter to Wimmer today, I'd ask him how he would go about a mission to America in the 21st century. I think what he would say is that he would do a mission, he would conduct a mission to America in the 21st century the same way he did in 1846. By establishing a Benedictine model of community as family, which is what he did. He brought St. Benedict's idea of community to America, and St. Benedict's community is a family. He brought that to America, and he would do that again. A community that is based on mutual love, that is based on a firm and practical faith, a community that has a deep respect for history and tradition, a community that has a sense of social responsibility, of hospitality, of generosity, and service to others, and a community that makes a lifelong commitment to hard work and frequent prayer. And this is something that Wimmer did in 1846. It continues in the Benedictine communities of America today, and if he came back, and if it didn't exist here today, he would come back, I think, and try to do the same thing.